Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of MISMO Mic'd Up. We are staying on the Mortgage Compliance Dataset MCD theme. It is fast becoming the talk of MISMO, and who better to talk about all things compliance and MCD than Josh Weinberg, president of Firstline Compliance. Josh, thanks for joining.
Brian, thanks so much for having me. Really my pleasure to be here and talk about a topic that I really think is so important right now.
Yeah, I want to get into your history with MISMO, but before we do that, let's make sure everybody knows, who Josh is and who Firstline Compliance is. So could you give us a quick overview of Firstline Compliance?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So Firstline Compliance is a compliance consulting firm specializing primarily in mortgage compliance and technology, and then working some in the fintech and consumer finance space. We're a company that was built kind of by mortgage professionals, for mortgage professionals, driven really rooted in our core values. Our core values are relationships, no assholes, ownership, excellence, and always learning. And sorry, but this is actually a point of discussion in our company. We had like a 2-hour leadership meeting of whether I'm supposed to say that or whether I should say no a-holes or, put dollar signs. And truthfully, it came out that that's a litmus test for us.
Yeah.
If we align on those core values, we're going to get through just about anything. And if we don't, no problem. There's lots of water in the ocean, plenty of room for everyone, just probably not on the same boat.
Love
And
that.
so I say that because it really drives not just how we approach work with clients, but the people that work with us, the causes or issues that we get involved in, how we show up in the industry really is rooted into those core values.
I love it. It. By the way, we're a PG-13, and I think any more you could say assholes just about at any level. I think it's probably made its way into Disney cartoons even. But
All right, good.
I love this. I love how you frame kind of working big issues, right? And this is where I want to really kind of go back nearly 15 years to your first formal role, if you will, with MISMO. You joined the board in 2012, I think, right?
It's actually December of 2012. So right around the time industry was facing this other pretty big set of changes in the form of Dodd-Frank and TRID. And so one of the reasons I was asked to get more involved in MISMO, but really took it on and wanted to be part of the board, was because of the shifts that were happening to industry from a regulatory perspective. But what was so critical was to be able to communicate those issues in a way that business leaders could understand them.
Right.
It was explained to me really well at the last MISMO workshop that so many of us that are working within MISMO are the folks on the train shoveling the coal, working so deeply within the system to make it go, even though they may not be the ones steering the train. The people steering the train would not have the power to get to where they're going without the people shoveling the coal. But because that work is so in the details, it sometimes loses some of the brain space or understanding of the people who are leading this industry. And so when the time comes that industry is transitioning, that there's something that is so critical for industry to go through, MISMO time and time again has brought the right people into the space to lead and deliver that message. Brian, not the least of who is you, at a time when MISMO really needed great leadership to get through these next challenges that industry is facing. Super happy to have a strong leader in place.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm coming up on 6 months, not anywhere near your getting close to 15 years involvement, but in a short 6 months span, I've had a lot of conversations with you at different events and with others that have been close to MISMO for a long time, and it really gives me an appreciation for those coal shovelers, as you said, right? It's pretty humbling to understand the hundreds of humans that come together to solve big problems, not for their own agenda, not for their company's agenda, but for the industry and ultimately for the consumers that we all serve. And one of the reasons we do this MISMO Mic'd Up podcast is to spread awareness of the great work that gets done, inside the MISMO community. And it's truly a community. And I appreciate you being very involved for a very long time.
It's my honor and my privilege, and I completely agree. Credit to those who don't show up on camera, because there are so many people working behind the scenes to make all of this function. And if I were to list them, the podcast would go on way too long, so I won't. But
Yeah.
to anyone who happens to see this, my enduring gratitude, and we see the tremendous work that you're putting in, and the effectiveness of MISMO, but also the tools that are the benefits that are coming out of it are because of your hard works. I also kind of think it's really important to highlight or to emphasize that the process that MISMO brings, there's always so much attention to the standard, and the standard is really critical. But the point I think you were making is the standard is developed in this open, collaborative, consensus-based model, intentionally inclusive of all the viewpoints and stakeholders on an issue. I also think that's why it works.
Yeah.
It's because it's not being built in a vacuum. It's being built by people that really care and have different viewpoints from different sides of the issue. And when you bring in so many good viewpoints, you build something that's got a far better chance of working.
Right. Well, I can't think of a better example in terms of a problem that's being solved inside of MISMO than MCD, right? The Mortgage Compliance Dataset. And you've been, in the middle of that from day one. For those that aren't really familiar with the process of a standard becoming a standard, but also this particular standard, kind of take us back and talk us through kind of the early stages of MCD and kind of where you've seen it come and how the collaboration, especially when we talk about the regulators being part of the process, how that's all shaped where we are today.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just try and level set on what is the MCD. So the MCD is the Mortgage Compliance Dataset. And if this is repeat for you, apologies, but I'll try and keep it succinct. The way I've been able to really conceptualize this is the current state of MCD are a specified set of fields and definitions for what those fields mean. What's really helpful is that they're existing fields. Think about like annual percentage rate. We all know what that means, and that we should go to calculate it to a specific number of decimals, that it has certain accuracy components within tolerances that are set within truth in lending. That's what the MCD standard is creating, is acceptance across what these fields are and what they mean. That's the starting point. What is really helpful and why I think that's so critical is if we go back to even before Dodd-Frank and before TRID, there was a file format called the LEF, the loan exam file, that was starting to be used in the industry for state regulators to conduct mortgage examinations. When TRID came out, the LEF effectively broke. One of the challenges with that file format was it was closed. At the time, I was a lender, and I would deliver an LEF file to my state regulator during an exam. And then they would ask me about questions within the file. And I'd say, I would really like to help you, but I have no idea what you're talking about because I can't see it. All I can do is export this to you and then try and answer questions based on what you give me. So it was closed to me. It was closed actually to the regulator. What we're getting is a delivery and results. And so that became really difficult to work through what the questions were, but in the nuance and the specific requirements in TRID, it really pushed the boundaries around the ability for the LEF to contain all of the compliance requirements. So really starting then, probably 2013, 2015, that timeframe, a lot of people started working on how do we fix this. We all know the critical importance of standardization in state exams, both for licensees who are examined as well as to the regulators themselves. How do we improve the effectiveness, the efficiency, the consistency of state mortgage regulatory exams? And that really became part of the goal or the mission behind the MCD. So fast forward to kind of where we are now. What's been helpful for me to conceptualize it is thinking it kind of like HMDA, where in this world, we're still going to have source documents, things like our disclosures. We're going to have source data, the data that's within our LOS. And then we're going to have the MCD. That's going to be like our LAR data, the set of data that we submit of all of our loans to the federal regulators to review. And then like HMDA, there are compliance vendors that are going to review the MCD file before it gets submitted, very much the same way the CFPB portal runs through validity errors and quality errors and syntactical errors, or compliance vendors who provide similar services. Think of that now towards federal regulatory compliance. So accuracy of the annual percentage rate, were disclosures delivered on time, were tolerance cures provided or required or issued, all of those different requirements that states really should interpret and review the same way because they're federal requirements. There really should not be a difference of interpretation in the accuracy of APR in any state. But that happens sometimes because of the methodologies and the delivery platforms or the data that those regulators are receiving. So for industry, what we're really going to win, and by industry now, I mean the licensees who are being examined, is that, say, Alabama and California and Washington, D.C. and Iowa all embrace and accept the MCD file format. That means if Alabama runs the MCD and completes its examination, then DC and those other states can accept Alabama's examination. That saves a tremendous amount of time and resource for the mortgage regulator. It also saves a tremendous amount of time and resource for the licensee. One last piece is because all of the loan data running through at kind of a portfolio level through the compliance testing, what this resolves for the mortgage regulators is that when they come to do an exam, what they often ask for now is they'll say, hey, upload a list, a loan log of all the files that are applicable during this scope of the exam. And then from that list, they pick a few to review and examine. So they have a loan list and then they do random sampling. What's going to pivot is 100% review. They're, instead of asking for a loan list, going to request the MCD. The entire portfolio will run through the compliance testing, and then the compliance engines will throw back or display, here's the results across the portfolio, enabling the state regulators to now, instead of blindly random sample, target select based on violations they see. The most important piece of this, and the state regulators have been very clear, it's an open book test. Check your work before you submit it.
Yeah.
Nothing can make the state regulators happier than for lenders and licensees to run the MCD compliance test and fix anything that's there before we send it to the exam. That's actually the goal that everyone wants, that this concept of us and them and regulators against licensees. No, we're all wanting the same thing here. We all want to give loans. We want to serve credit. We want to do good loans. We want to be able to demonstrate compliance and have a way to measure who's following compliance and where do we need to improve.
I love that. It's in what you just described in terms of the open book aspect. I was with a large lender a couple of weeks ago, and they've already adopted MCD in their process. They have proprietary tech, and they start testing the minute a loan is a loan, right? And then using that MCD through the entire life cycle of a loan, they have the testing that just continues. And so, to your point, and this is not gamesmanship where they're fixing something for purposes of, passing an exam. It's really identifying where there are potential flaws in the process, and then using those early signals to fix the process, and then you have the clean output. That was a great explanation of the open book exam, and I think this is a good segue into kind of the current state of MCD. So, if we go back to December of 2025, it was the first of, I think, 3 or 4 in-person / remote or virtual events co-hosted by MISMO and CSBS, Conference of State Bank Supervisors. And in December, it was the Tech Sprint kickoff, a 4-hour virtual workshop, which had over 500 registered professionals. And what was really cool for me to see, and again, that was relatively early in my tenure, was there was like 100 regulators, 100 plus regulators that were registered for that. That following that event was our MISMO Winter Summit in January, and we did a in-person, kind of a hybrid in-person and virtual workshop with, we had over 100 in the room and another 100 plus on the virtual, where we took some of the problem statements created in December and then just kind of dug a little bit deeper into those problem statements. And then that led to the NMLS conference in Orlando in February, where a tech demo was organized, and you guys you were there in the room. Can you just describe the process to kind of how we got through those stages, and then I want to pivot into current state, which is very much adoption.
Perfect. Yeah. So I love the way you laid that out, and I think it's exemplifies the MISMO process, building on continual success or continual progress. So when we started with the tech sprints, that was hey, we have now released the MCD data standard. It's out in the wild to be used, but again, limited to the data fields and the definitions. And so what we started working on in the workshop, and a lot of the compliance vendors collectively, as well as on their own, was what do we do with the data set? And so one point that I think is really important to highlight, this testing is being performed by trusted compliance engines already in the industry. I think I can say their names: ComplianceEase, Assurity, Loan Analysis by Brooks from Evolve, LendingPad, all technologies and vendors who have been reviewing and creating the testing results. I think that's really important because it should hopefully provide some confidence that this is not something new that industry is going to have to contend with. This is the existing industry solving and coming up with the path forward to make a better way of doing things.
Right.
And so I think that's really important. I had received some concerns initially that, like, well, wait a minute, how do we know the states are going to get it right?
Right.
The states aren't creating the compliance tests.
That's right.
It's the compliance engines. Now, in saying that, the states are going to make sure they agree. They're going to make sure that the way that the compliance engines, that they understand the requirements that they're following. And so that's one of the things that we started working on at the workshop, is identifying what are the baseline federal tests that should be applied. What are the reg citations that go along with those? Again, very open book to what we're going to be looking at, and the how and the why.
Yeah.
And so the process that we've been going through after that workshop is saying, okay, what else might there be? So literally going through the CFPB exam module, reg by reg that applies, and identifying out of scope, in scope for MCD, or this would be covered as a matter of review in examination. I really want to highlight, though, that this is an existing process, because it's so important that we're not creating something new. We're not creating new burdens. We're building solutions that will help build efficiency and the effectiveness of the solution. I think that's so important. This might be a good time to say it. Unfortunately, I've been proven right on this almost every time, which is that the mortgage industry tends to lag behind the general technology world by at least a decade. And the mortgage community tends to lag behind the regulatory community tends to lag behind the lending community by almost another decade. And what that means is that as an industry, we don't change unless we have to.
Yeah.
Even when we know it's better for us. And so TRID was one of those events that forced, or all of Dodd-Frank, that forced industry to change to change the way we communicated with our industry partners, to change the technology and work streams. MISMO is very much involved. Fast forward, and we had the pandemic. And the pandemic forced us to embrace and adopt remote online notarization and RIN and all the other flavors. Even though that technology had existed for a long time, there was some event that catalyzed and forced us to move forward. And again, MISMO was there to come up with standards. And here we are now in an environment of, let's say, uncertainty at a federal regulatory level, but all of us in this industry working way too long to go to a process where there is no system. So this is the point, in my opinion, where industry is demanding continuity and consistency across the state regulatory process. And that's what MCD is building.
I love that. And I think, what I've seen, happening, and again, in my 6 months in this role, is the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, CSBS, playing a very critical role in the MCD process. They are in the work group, right? They are rolling up their sleeves, doing the work right alongside industry professionals like yourself. And I've seen state regulators. I've seen Jeremy from Alabama very passionate about this, and so it gives me a lot of hope that we have the right momentum. CSBS has their Catalyst initiative, and I love the word catalyst because I do believe this MCD plays a role in a longer term vision that CSBS has for its membership, which are the state regulators. And I do see this as being beneficial for the entire ecosystem, benefiting the regulators and the licensees. It's one of those unique points in time, I think, and I think there's a lot that could be built off of this single, building block.
I could not agree more, both in the gratitude and praise for CSBS. I had the opportunity to talk with Brandon Milhorn, president of CSBS, at the workshop. And if you haven't met Brandon, he's a great guy, very passionate and incredibly smart, but also thoughtful and deliberative. And so kind of our hallway conversation, maybe this is a good bridge, really was around like adoption.
Yeah.
And he's like, Josh, this is all really good work. How do we make sure it works? And I said, well, Brandon, I think the model is built into the prudential standards for non-bank servicers. And his first reaction was, Josh, I don't like requirements. I don't like forcing someone to have to do this. What a refreshing perspective from the person leading the group of conference state bank supervisors. I'm not going to dictate. I'm going to listen and learn to create something that works. I couldn't ask for more. That is tremendously helpful. What I followed up in saying was, like prudential standards, we actually don't need every state to adopt it. The prudential standards for non-bank servicers were adopted by 13 states. They cover every non-bank servicer in the country because each of those servicers is licensed in at least one of those 13 states. So when it comes to MCD, who's not licensed in California? Well, maybe the small lender in Iowa, or the small lender in Alabama, or the large lender in DC that's only in. As more and more states adopt it, do I think we're going to get to 51 plus? No. But I think we're going to get north of 30.
Yeah.
That's enough traction.
Totally agree.
This is the momentum, both from the regulatory side, because truth be told, a lot of states, it's in their state statutes. They can force industry to do this. If this is their methodology of examination, they get to say, do it this way if you want to be in my state. To be clear, that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, can I come to the table and participate in the conversation so it works for my state and the rest of the states as well? That's the value. That's such a huge component of what MISMO brings and allows. It is the opportunity for the discussion and the stakeholder feedback.
Love that. So I want to close this out, Josh. What can you share? What's exciting that you guys are working on at at Firstline that industry should know and be aware of, besides MCD, of course?
So, the way I'm going to answer that, when we were kind of putting together our roadmap for 26, we decided kind of the key concept we wanted to deliver on is value. How do we deliver value? How do we deliver value to our clients? How do we deliver value to industry? What projects and tasks do we dedicate resources and time to commit towards? And so that's really it. It is, where are we able to drive the most value? It's definitely in ways like participating with MISMO, currently the chair of MBA's Regulatory Compliance Committee. We're involved in a lot of the state associations, working a lot with CSBS and ARMOR, and participating on the industry development working group with NMLS, being at the table. And this was not at all in your conversation, but I know we're going to be dropping this soon.
Yeah.
This is a time that industry needs advocacy. Flying is not easy right now, but anyone who's listening that can make it to DC for the MBA Advocacy Conference, there's probably not a more important time to be in the room. If you want your voice to be heard, you need to be at the table, and you can't be at the table if you're not in the room. That's true at MISMO, that's true at an advocacy level, and I guess that kind of where I would say that's where Firstline is focused. What rooms are we going to be in? What tables can we sit at so our voice can drive the most value?
That is awesome. I have one follow-up question because it just struck me, as I think about the service providers, the platform providers, the tooling providers in our industry. Can you just describe the value of being at the table, specifically with MISMO, early in the formation of work that gets done, and how you can create value for your own firm, your own company, by having that inside baseball knowledge as things are evolving?
I'm really glad you asked that question. I think it's almost intuitive to see. If you're participating in the ingredients that go into the recipe, you're going to know the recipe before it's published.
Yeah.
You get to practice, I'm going to kill this analogy, baking the cake to make sure it comes out the way you want it before you serve it. There is no better way to know what you need to be building and how than to be at the table contributing to it. And then think about the development cycles. I say I'm a recovering technologist. The technology development cycle is fast if it's at 6 months. In order to write business requirements, to create functional requirements, to turn that into code, to actually develop specs, to put it through QA, to run it through beta testing with clients. There's a lot of steps that have to go into the process before. Being at the table is your head start. It also is the opportunity for you to identify what's going to be special and unique for you. How are we going to differentiate? The MCD standard is going to be the same. What we're seeing from the compliance vendors in the space is the results in those reports are different. That's great. What I mean in different is the MCD is being evaluated the same. The value they generate or how they're differentiating in those reports and results, that's going to be the difference in how one lender or one regulator chooses one or the other. If you're a tech vendor and you in some way either need to ingest, produce, or validate an MCD, if you're not participating, if you're not at the table, you're behind and you need to come to the table. Because if you're waiting for this thing to be fully developed and published, you're going to be a minimum of 6 months out to the thing that's bringing the most value and efficiency that industry has seen in a long time.
That is a mic drop right there. Josh, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I love your energy. I love your passion. I mostly am thankful and grateful for your decade-plus service to the industry through MISMO. Thank you so much.
Really, my pleasure. Such an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, guys, we'll come back next Friday and join us for the next episode of MISMO Mic'd Up.